Hi everyone, it's Ron Johnson from L.T.L. Tutoring Central, and it's Friday, and today I'm talking about listening. Pardon? What did you say? Yes, I'm talking about listening, but listening is not exactly the same as hearing. We often hear people talk, but we're not really listening to that. Yeah, I'm sure you've had that experience when you maybe we're in a crowded room, or maybe you were just busy thinking about something else, and your friend said something to you, and, pardon? What did you say? You really weren't paying attention, so especially if they now ask you a question about what they've been telling you, you have no idea how to answer because you really weren't listening. You were hearing more or less, but you weren't listening. In school, if you're taking a course, and even in the workplace, to be honest, but we're talking primarily about students studying different courses. It could be at grade school, could be at high school, could be at the university level, could be even postgraduate level. It doesn't matter because listening is a skill that you can train yourself to do better. Even if you're a fairly good listener, there are always a few tips that can help improve your listening skills. And here are a few of them. One is be attentive. That's obvious. It seems obvious, but it isn't always something that happens automatically. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves to be attentive. Sit up straight, have good posture, and focus on what's being said. Ensure that we consciously are thinking about listening to the speaker, whether that's a teacher, a presenter, it could be another student giving a talk or seminar or something like this. But if we want to learn from it, we need to make sure that we're being attentive and our attention is focused. Try to make eye contact. Now, you don't want to stare at a person, but you want to make frequent eye contact and show that you're listening to the teacher. The teacher, first of all, will notice which students are making eye contact, and the teacher will assume, at least, maybe correctly, maybe incorrectly in some cases, that that student is paying attention and listening to what he or she has to say. Right away, you're getting a better grade. The teacher might not even consciously do this, but if you're not paying attention, if you're particularly really not paying attention, looking away, looking out the window, staring at your cell phone or fidget spinner or whatever, it has an effect. Teachers are people, believe it or not, and we like to be listened to just like you do. So I'm sure that you may have had the experience of talking to someone. Now I'm flipping it from our first example where someone was talking to you, but now you're talking to someone and they're looking over here, or they're looking at the sky, or they're looking at their feet through your whole conversation, and they're never looking at you. They're never making eye contact. A few things you're going to do: you're probably going to abbreviate your story or whatever you're talking about, because you realize that the person's not really interested, so why would you continue? You're probably not going to give them what you felt you were going to give them. Whether that was worth something to them or not, I don't know, but nevertheless, you're going to cut it short. Teachers will sometimes do this too. They're definitely teachers, so they're going to go through the steps and the information that they intend to give you, but they're not going to be energetic and enthusiastic, and they're not going to give a lot of extra if they're getting nothing back from the classroom. Now, of course, an individual person wouldn't have that effect necessarily, but if the whole classroom is all, if nobody's listening, no one's paying attention, and it's fairly obvious that they aren't, you're not going to get as much out of the teacher. It only takes a couple of students to really be paying attention for the teacher to give more to the classroom. And, of course, if you have questions afterwards, they're going to give more to you, because it's human nature. If we're receiving something, if we know that someone's interested in what we're saying, we're much more likely to give back. So you will win, the teacher will win, and maybe even the classroom will win, because if there's enough people paying attention, even those who aren't may actually get a much better performance out of the teacher this year or this semester. So try to make eye contact from time to time. Make sure that it looks like you're paying attention. But don't just make it look like it, actually do. Be open. This is another point. Be open to new ideas, new experiences, thoughts that you didn't have before, particularly if they contradict ideas that you've held for a while. You don't have to accept them in the end, but while you're listening, be open to them. Don't simply close those shutters and shut the door and say, no, don't believe it, not going there. Because then you don't learn. You don't learn anything. And you can always learn. Even if at the end you don't change your mind, you may have better arguments for why you hold your position because you've heard the alternatives. So always be open and be willing to listen and allow the person, whether that's a teacher or a student or a researcher, to give you their evidence, give you their arguments. And you can develop questions. Think about questions. This is another good technique for actively listening. So not just hearing, but actively listening. Ask questions later or during if you're allowed to, but you can form those questions as you're listening, and that engages you more with the material. And that's going back to the be attentive part. You're not just listening, you're engaging with it. You're thinking of questions, but you're not shutting it down. You're not closing the door. Another good point is to sit near the front, or at least sit in a location in which you can hear and see the presenter or the teacher clearly. This is very important. So when people go to the movies or the theater, they usually try to get the best seat. Or sometimes you have to get a cheap seat at the theater, but you try to get the best seat if you can. You want to have the best view. You want to be able to hear well. You don't want to be interrupted from something that you're really going to enjoy. And yet when people go to the classroom, let's go to the back. So we don't have to pay too much attention. They're not going to notice us. They're probably not going to ask us a question. And maybe I can even sneak out the back door if I'm not very interested in this lecture. That is a really bad idea. If you really want to learn, if you want to do well in the course, show that you want to by sitting in an appropriate place, usually closer to the front, where you can hear and see the teacher, and you can make that eye contact a little easier, and they can make eye contact with you a little easier as well. Also, here's another good tip. Listen for verbal cues and nonverbal cues. So some teachers are very good at giving direct verbal cues. So a teacher might say, here's the clincher. One of my teachers used to do that all the time. That's a verbal cue, and her nonverbal cue was smashing the chalk on the chalkboard. And this was in a math class, so we knew when that crushing chalk was happening, we better pay attention to what's happening on the board and probably make a note of that as well. That was a very clear indicator that something important was coming. But there are other indicators, either verbal or nonverbal, that you can pay attention to and recognize as cues that something important is about to happen. So when the teacher is saying things like in the first place, or therefore, consequently, following this, that usually there's something important coming after that. We need to know what happened first. We also need to know what the effect was. So we need to know the therefore, ... whatever happens after that. So listen to those little cue words. If the teacher starts speaking more loudly, well, maybe it's just a difficult class and they're trying to talk over everyone else, but they also, he or she may also be trying to make a point. So their voice becomes louder because they're making an important point. They may also just speak a little bit slower and a little bit more specifically, and that's also an indication that they're trying to ensure that you understand what they're saying at this point. So that is probably important. You want to make sure that you pay even closer attention to that and maybe make a note of it as well. So verbal cues and nonverbal cues are very important. Another point is to avoid sitting around or in between classmates who are distracting. They may not be doing it on purpose, or they might be, but if they're distracting, you don't want to be near them. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to follow all of the advice that we just talked about. They may be wonderful people. They may be amazing friends with great personalities, super humor, and all the rest of it. But if they're trying to show you their pictures on Facebook or some YouTube video that they found very interesting during class when you're supposed to be listening, or if they're fidgeting, cracking their knuckles, making noises, just basically doing things that are going to distract you from being able to pay attention, it's not helping you. And you are responsible for your learning. This is what so many students don't seem to realize or sometimes forget. The teacher does not have to be a clown. The teacher does not need to be so entertaining that you cannot take your eyes off of him or her. I know that nowadays everyone wants bright colors and loud noises and pony rides, I said in my blog, but you don't need that to learn. To learn, you need to pay attention, and you need to listen, and you need to take your notes, and you need to follow all of the study tips that we've talked about previously, and we will talk about some more in future videos as well. It's great when you have a teacher who is entertaining and someone who has a personality that draws you in, but not everybody is like that. Teachers are human. They have all different personalities. You can learn from anyone if you apply the proper techniques, and if you are engaged with the material and follow through. It doesn't matter how wonderful or how poor the teacher is, you can still learn from that presenter, from that teacher, from that person. So make sure that you remember it's your responsibility. If you're getting bored, it's at least 90% your fault. You need to be engaged, you need to be asking questions, you need to be helping the teacher to help you learn the material. And I know that you can do it. I know that it sounds a little bit difficult at first, but once you practice some of these techniques, you'll find that you're much more interested in the course, even if it's not your favorite course. You learn so much more. You'll start doing better on quizzes and tests or assignments if they're written assignments. And again, that's going to make you feel better. That's going to motivate you to do more. So you have this positive cycle rather than a negative cycle. And again, you may be helping the teacher, and that may be helping the whole class as well. So you can feel good about that. So learn how to listen properly. It's really important. It's not taught very often in schools. They say listen. You're supposed to listen, but they don't say how to listen. Well, here are some points and tips on how to listen. Check the blog because it has further information, and I'll put the link to the blog below this video if you're watching on YouTube. I'll also put a link to the website because you can check that out. You can sign up for some courses or lessons, and I do study skills and strategies as well. There's some online courses. There's also some in-person courses that you would do directly with me. You can do online courses directly with me as well. And I will also put I will be putting a link to the cheat sheet, although it may not be there immediately, but I will be adding that for listening skills, so you can check that out as well. In the meantime, keep learning, keep having fun. Try to apply some of these tips for listening more carefully, listening more attentively, and I'm sure that you're going to do really well. If you have any questions or comments, make sure you put them below. Whether you're looking at Facebook or looking at YouTube, you should be able to do that. And also, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like, and I hope to see and talk to you soon. But for sure, we'll have another video next Friday. In the meantime, have a great week learning. Ron from L.T.L. Tutoring Central. Bye for now.